Well, it's good to be back after a break. I had a wonderful retreat and a little vacation on top of that. And no, I am not telling you where I went. But today we're beginning 1 week early our Lenten series. We're very excited about it. It'll take us all the way through the fifth Sunday of Lent. It's called Rebuild Faith. And once again, in Lent this year, we're following a book by the same title, Rebuild Faith, a hand guide for skeptical Catholics. So if you have joined a small group or you're currently in a small group, you'll get a free copy of this book. But if not, you can still purchase the book online wherever books are sold. Hope you sign up for a small group, and that's an incentive to get one of these books. But it's a great book to have for Lent because it's comprised of 40 very short chapters. It's a perfect daily devotional for the 40 days of Lent. It's also a great gift for a person in your life who may be skeptical of faith, because that's the whole fresh approach here in what it's talking about in Lent and as a devotional for disciples of Christ. Being skeptical can refer to a wide variety of people. You could be skeptical of God or church or religion and come to church every week. Or you could be a believer, but you're skeptical of being part of a Christian community and going to church. Why do I have to do that? I can follow Jesus by myself. You could be skeptical of the possibility of growing in your faith. Maybe you think, I'm too young or I'm too old. Maybe you don't think you're worthy to grow in faith for some reason. Maybe you're skeptical about church politics or the Pope or secular politics. Maybe you're just struggling with faith in general, skeptical about God. Well, I don't blame you if that describes you or anyone here or someone you know. During my vacation time, I happened to read a couple news articles. One article was about a recent poll, and it was a poll about people's various levels of trust in various professions. So it turns out that almost all professions across the board are losing public trust. People are losing trust in everything. You know what the highest professions on the list were? Nurses and dentists. So I hope you trust nursing and the nursing profession, and I hope you trust dentists. But even that is down. About 80% of people trust nurses and dentists. That's even down from previous year. And at the bottom of the list, just above lawyers and politicians, are actually clergy. I think it's the lowest ever level of trust in clergy. 38% of people trust clergy. I don't necessarily blame them. There's a lot of good reason for people not to trust, so-called men of God, people of the cloth, for a lot of bad stuff that's happened, especially in recent times. Well, I read that article about that poll, and then the second news article I read was about the 40 million Americans who are, quote-unquote, deconstructing their Christian faith. They are in a process of reevaluating or deconstructing how they were raised, and especially their ideas of Christianity and God. So those are all people who maybe were raised either Catholic or Protestant. So it's even a so prevalent thing, it's a movement. They call it the deconstruction movement. People moving away from various beliefs that they were maybe taught about God and Jesus and various rule-keeping and policies and ways of prayer. So obviously, I'm a committed Catholic. I fully believe in Catholic faith and Catholic teaching. But then again, I don't necessarily blame people for deconstructing aspects of how they were taught and raised, especially about God. I think at times it's actually necessary. So, for example, maybe you can relate to how I was taught about the image of God as a kid. This morning, I had first reconciliation, first penance for about half of our students this year. About 14 kids and all their families were there. And I told them, as a little kid, my impression was that God was a policeman. So my grandfather was actually a policeman in New Jersey, so maybe that has something to do with it. I was thinking about how that impression of God as a policeman affected me. I just wanted to be a good boy. I wanted to be a good boy, and that was the most important thing in relation to my faith. A good boy to my parents, my teachers, everybody. And it took me a very, very long time to reevaluate and rebuild in my heart and my mind the true image of God. That God is our Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. He's not a cosmic cop in the sky who's going to give us a citation. So that is one of many things we're going to talk about. This series, the next 6 weeks, is an invitation to go deeper into the truth of who God is and what really matters. What really matters about our faith, whether you're skeptical or not. And today I'm going to cut to the chase right up front. It may seem obvious, but it's got to be stated. It's about Jesus Christ. It's got to be about the person of Jesus Christ. Rebuilding our faith is about coming back or coming for the first time to who Jesus really is. It's that simple. It's not primarily about the music we sing, or some churches have fog machines, or your opinion of the Pope or politics or any number of issues. It's about Jesus. And yet, it's so easy to lose sight of that fact. Well, how were you raised to think about God? What is your image of Jesus that you were raised about? Think about that. Well, there's a common experience that we all share, that we all can relate to, and we get a glimpse of that in today's gospel and how to discern the next step in our life. So we'll look at this gospel reading from Mark. This beautiful short encounter perfectly illustrates the character of Jesus Christ, who he really is. If you want to get to know Jesus, you have to read the Gospels. That's where Jesus is talked about. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if that's intimidating to you, Mark is the shortest of the four. So begin there. We're going to hear a lot of Mark this upcoming Lent and actually throughout this whole year, because we're in that cycle of hearing the Gospel of Mark. So the story here begins very simply like this. Jesus' encounter. A leper came to Jesus and, kneeling down, begged him and said, "If you wish, you can make me clean." So leprosy, today we call it Hansen's disease, was a death sentence. For most of human history, it meant a long, slow, and painful death. The illness, if left untreated by modern antibiotics, can lead to oozing sores on your body, loss of limbs eventually, and even sometimes blindness. It's transmitted by touch. And so, because in the Bible and in ancient times, many different skin conditions and diseases were all associated and even considered leprosy, often a whole bunch of these people were quarantined together. The Jewish law, which often in the law, if you read it, it serves as community rules, regulations for the community of the people of Israel. It has a lot to say about leprosy. And we heard in our first reading today a little part of that from the book of Leviticus, chapter 13, which says this: "The one who bears the sore of leprosy shall keep his garments rent and his head bare, and shall muffle his beard. He shall cry out, 'Unclean, unclean!' He shall dwell apart, making his abode outside the camp." So lepers had to live outside of society. Whenever they're approached by other people, they were required by the law to yell, "Unclean!" And that was meant, that law, to protect the community. But the law could not, of course, heal people. The law could only contain The law cut off people. It did not heal. It cut off people from the greater community, from society, from their families, and it cut off people from God. So this particular leper is bold. He's bold. He comes to Jesus. Notice that courage he has. He knows what he wants to ask. He's specific. He has a confidence that Jesus can do something with his hurt and with his pain. He kneels before him. And even, we're in chapter 1 of Mark, at the beginning of his ministry, Jesus already has a reputation. We've heard that in the last couple weeks. A reputation for having that power to heal and to restore people. So here's Jesus' response. Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand, touched him, and said to him, I will do it. Be made clean. The leprosy left him immediately, and he was made clean. So the phrase, move with pity. Move with pity. It's more than just Jesus' emotion. It's deeper than that. It's a deep connection in Jesus' soul with this man's pain and his suffering. Most people, if you see a leper, you would react with disgust. Jesus did not do that. Most people would run away or at least look away. Jesus sees. He sees the unclean things in our life. He sees your faults and mine. He sees our failures. He sees our flaws more than anyone else. And you know what? He's not thinking, how disgusted I am. How disappointed I am with you. What a loser you are. Jesus has compassion for us. Jesus reacts with compassion. And notice that important detail here. He reaches out to touch him. Just think about it. It's possible that this man, this leper, had not touched anyone for a very long time. Human contact was forbidden. People would go in the opposite direction if a leper ran up to you. So just imagine that human touch, just reaching out a hand. Jesus commands that the leprosy be gone, that he be made clean. And it happens. Well, this, my friends, is what friendship with our Lord Jesus is all about. It's him reaching out to us when we ask, not just with that care and that compassion, even more. He can do something about it. Jesus acts. He actually heals him. And then he invites us even more to something more, because there's a little twist to this story that we then hear next. Then warning him sternly, he dismissed him at once. He said to him, see that you tell no one anything, but go show yourself to the priests and offer for your cleansing what Moses prescribed. That will be proof for them. So Jesus orders this guy to be quiet, and then he tells him, go and do what the law prescribes. So if you look back in the book of Leviticus, chapter 13 and 14, you'll see that if a leper happens to become clean, to be made clean, he's supposed to go to the priest, to get the Jewish priest, to give a thanksgiving offering, and as a sign to the greater community of that person's restoration. So here this leper's life is restored, completely restored. He's healed physically. He's healed relationally with the community, and he's healed in relationship with God. It's just one encounter, one single encounter with Jesus. That can change our life. But why does Jesus then tell the leper to be quiet, to not talk to anybody? Well, this is actually a common theme all throughout Mark's gospel. It's pretty interesting. Jesus constantly warns people and orders them not to tell anybody, but they do the opposite. They do it anyway. I think it's a kind of playfulness here in this storytelling and a kind of reverse psychology. Well, that's exactly what then happens in the next verse. The man went away and began to publicize the whole matter, so that it was impossible for Jesus to enter a town openly. He remained outside in desert places, and people kept coming to him from everywhere. So the man completely ignores what Jesus tells him to do. As a result, Jesus can't move around freely anymore. He can't move around in the town openly. So everybody is looking for him. They're desperate for him. They want something from him. And I can relate to this a little bit. So on my vacation, I was at this hotel. And when I go on vacation, oftentimes I try to lay low. I don't dress like a priest, and I just try to disconnect from everything and to refresh. So there was this guy at the hotel, staff person, who was trying to sell me a timeshare. And he was relentless. And so after about 2 days, I sat down with him, and then eventually I told him, I'm a priest. And then he got all embarrassed. And he said, I'm so sorry, Father. And, I'm so unfortunately, you're not eligible for this timeshare deal. But let me go grab 2 bottles of water so that I can bring it home and bless my house. And so he runs over to the bar and gets 2 bottles of water, and I bless them right there for him. So I think, what is going on here? So I can relate to Jesus a little bit. But notice here at the end of this story, the great switch that occurs. Think about it, the great exchange. Now the leper is free to move around the town. The leper is free and reconciled with God and with the community, and Jesus goes out to the desert to try to get away and pray. There's a great exchange. So here's what we can all relate to, whether you're skeptical or not of faith. All of us have felt like that leper at one time or another. It was almost 4 years ago that just like that, in March of 2020, we all went into quarantine. But it's not just COVID. It's isolation because of sickness. It's isolation because of broken relationship. It's isolation because of hardship in our life. And this, my friends, is why we choose to follow Jesus Christ, to become his friends, to become his followers, because there's always a great exchange that happens. And when we follow him, there's always going to be blessings. There's always going to even be rewards. So in the course of this series, in the next several weeks, we're going to look at that great exchange that takes place. And we'll look at something that is familiar to a lot of the parishioners that I've talked several times before about, the simple steps of discipleship. The simple steps that we believe that if we take these steps, we will grow as a lifelong learner, as a follower of him. That's what the word discipleship means, a lifelong follower. So we serve, and in exchange, God gives us purpose for our life. He reminds us in service that our lives matter. We tithe and we give. And in exchange, God gives our hearts a sense of peace because we realize he's the provider. We engage in small groups or in small community with one another. And in exchange, we see our burdens lifted when we engage and share with each other. We practice prayer. We practice the sacramental life. And in exchange, we grow in intimacy with God. We share our faith. And in learning to share our faith in exchange, we grow in our faith because we are recognizing in thanksgiving how much God has blessed us. And how can we not share that? So these are just some of the examples of the blessings that occur when we follow Jesus as lifelong disciples. So that's what we'll look at in the course of this series. And I hope it's a fresh new look for all of us. And as I said at the beginning, it's got to be about Jesus. It's got to be about him. Today I just invite you to join us the next 6 weeks. And in your quiet time this week, here's my challenge. What do you need to ask Jesus right now? Like the leper, all of us have something to ask. Perhaps it's physical or emotional healing. Perhaps it's encouragement in your life right now. Perhaps it's a sense of direction that you have to take. Perhaps you're asking for a loved one. Perhaps it's a desire just for more in life. Perhaps it's a rebuilt faith, a reconstructed sense of who God really is. So be like the leper. Be bold. Be courageous. Be specific in your ask. My friends, a single encounter with Jesus Christ can change your life. And then in following Jesus, we can rebuild our faith. Amen.